It's been 5 years since a judge vacated the murder conviction of Mark Schand, who spent 27 years behind bars for a murder he didn't commit. New England Public Radio senior reporter Karen Brown has reported on Shand's case for years. She spoke with me in the studio about the injustices he endured even after his release and how a retail empire he'd brainstormed years before his arrest is taking shape today.
Well, I found out from a press release probably about 3 or 4 years ago when he filed a lawsuit against Springfield, Hartford, and some police departments over his wrongful conviction. And at that point, I thought, I would like to find out what his life is like getting out of prison after 27 years. Yeah. And so that I met with him and I learned just a lot more about what life is like after you're released as someone who is wrongfully convicted.
Right, and so some of the findings that you found, or he found, and then you reported out, there's a system in place if you're imprisoned and you serve your time and you're released, there's some help for you, right?
Right, there's a lot of reentry services for people who have who were found guilty and served their entire sentence. But if you're released because they determined you weren't supposed to be in prison, that you were wrongfully convicted and wrongfully incarcerated, they kind of just push you out of the system and they basically say you're on your own, or at least they did at that point when he got out.
And so what was his reaction to finding that out? He was trying to make his life in Connecticut at that point. He had moved out of Springfield, right?
Yeah, he was shocked, just like I was surprised. He thought, like, no housing assistance, no job training, no nothing. You know, I haven't, you know, even though he didn't deserve to be in prison, he still had 30 years of not being in society, and there's a lot you need to learn, and it's hard to get a job. Even if you explain, well, I wasn't supposed to be in prison, not a lot of employers want to hire you if you've been in prison for whatever reason for 30 years.
You have that giant mark
stigma.
On your, the stigma that comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up telling people, you know, Google my name and you'll see what happened to me. And someone finally did that and say, okay, I'm going to give you a chance. And so he was able to get jobs, but they were hard jobs. They were manual labor, UPS, assembly line for a gun manufacturer. And, you know, he was trying to get some kind of financial assistance, but in the meantime, he had to work.
And it was also a very different life than he had planned for himself, right? He wanted to be an entrepreneur when he was young. He'd even signed a lease, you reported?
Yeah, he was on the way to become the owner of a clothing store when he was about 19, when he got arrested for this nightclub shooting that he's always claimed he was nowhere near. So he feels like getting back into business today is sort of starting up where he should have been 30-some years ago.
And to the details of that conviction, so he was incarcerated for almost 30 years for the murder of a woman here in Springfield. A stray bullet killed a young woman outside of a nightclub in Springfield. How did he eventually convince the system that he was innocent? Because he maintained for years, you know, witnesses were coerced. I wasn't even in Springfield at the time the shooting took place. You know, what did he have to go through to prove to the state?
He had several lawyers working very hard on his defense. And his case was not DNA related, so there weren't as many sort of Innocence Project groups that were willing to take his case on, but there was a group called Centurion Ministries that worked with him. And they did a lot of research and they looked up some of the witnesses that testified against him, and they determined, or they were able to convince a judge that the witnesses were not truthful, that there was a lot of pressure and persuasion, and that was the reason that basically he was released.
And so now, having been released and as he's navigated the system, he found that he is eligible for some compensation, but even there's more sort of red tape and legalese that he had to go through. I understand through your reporting, he eventually got a settlement, but talk about the process he had to go through.
Right. Well, he initially thought, well, once the state releases me, they'll want to make things right. And there was a statute back then that said you can get up to $500,000 if you were wrongfully convicted to help you get back on your feet. What he didn't realize is that you had to fight for that $500,000. You had to prove, even though a judge let you out, you still had to prove that you were innocent, because the law is such that they don't want to pay out if it turns out you were released on a technicality. So you essentially have to go to court again. It took him about 3 years, and he still had to settle for less than the maximum, and he still had to give money to his attorney. So he ended up with about $300,000 after about 3 years. But he took that money and he bought a rental property with it to get some income, and he used it to start a chain of smoothie stores.
So that's the sort of business track that he's come back to now, which he's doing in Connecticut when you visited him for your story.
Right, right.
And he has his family involved, right? And then he has some more plans to maybe bring in others to help with the business as he moves forward?
Right. Well, he has a very supportive family, and his son, who was in utero when he went to prison, is now in his early 30s, and he's helping him pass out flyers to promote the business, and his grandchildren are passing out, free ice cream samples and things like that. He said he would love to be able to hire inmates, ex-inmates, those who were wrongfully convicted and those who were properly convicted. Even the guilty need help. And so he would like eventually to include those in his business. But this was, I thought, kind of a funny part. He said they're just not yet good enough at making smoothies, and he ultimately needs to protect his business. So he would love to help inmates as long as they learn how to make smoothies correctly.
Because he says in something in your story that smoothie folks are pretty picky, is what he's finding. It's very, very narrow science there. For his part, he has a civil suit against the city of Springfield and Hartford, right?
Right, right. And that is a suit that is ongoing and very, very slow moving. It could be millions of dollars, but you just don't. Those cases are very hard to prove. There's the events happened 30 years ago. It's hard to look up everybody that was involved. So that's a very slow moving process. So the state statute is supposed to be much quicker. And so, for him, it still took 3 years. Now the statute has changed in part.
Under the new criminal justice law, right?
Right. As part of the overhaul that happened last year, they changed the compensation law for those wrongfully convicted. And now the cap is $1 million, not $500,000. And it includes attorney's fees. And it allows for more reentry services like job training and housing assistance. So it should be better now for people in the future who are wrongfully convicted.
And is that specifically because of Mr. Shand's case, or is it a combination of cases? Do we know?
Well, it's probably a combination, but Mark Shand's case definitely had an impact on some of the legislators who pushed to change the law. One of them told me specifically that she felt terrible for what Mark Schand had to go through, and some other people that were also wrongfully incarcerated, released, and then had to take up collection just to buy a winter coat.
For his part, what does he say about the process that he's gone through, being wrongfully convicted, being released, needing to fight for every penny? Is he angry? What does he say about the state of affairs?
He says he doesn't want to spend time being angry. He says he's not bitter. He's certainly moving forward. He just wants to get his businesses taken care of. He wants to be successful. He wants to kind of carry on from where he was. I think he's really not happy about what happened to him. I think he's trying not to be bitter, but he's very clear that what happened to him was not right. He's not okay with it, but he just doesn't want, for his own sake, to dwell on that.
Did you get a chance to talk with him about the changes to the criminal justice law and if he thinks that's, the $1 million cap is even sufficient?
I didn't talk so much with him about how things will be different for those in the future. I think he is glad that they made some changes. I did talk to his lawyer, who said it's definitely going in the right direction. I also talked to the Attorney General, who his lawyer, blamed her office for dragging their feet, for making it so difficult. Her point is that that's the way the law is written, that it is adversarial, that you have to fight to get the money, and she would be fine if they changed the law so that it was more of a claims process. You're released from prison, you weren't supposed to be in prison, you get compensation. But at the moment, that's not the way the law is written, even the new version.